Welcome to Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times, presented by Worth Wealth Management, a weekly conversation with area leaders about how to persevere during uncertain times. Now here's your host, Gary Shorman.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times. And our program today is one that is a little bit of a surprise to me because we all hear about fentanyl, the deaths involved with that, those sort of things. But our guest is Angela Kennecke, and she's the founder of Emily's Hope. And Emily, welcome to our program today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So, Emily's Hope, tell me a little bit about the background there, and then we'll talk about the number that surprised me was that 1,500 Kansans who have died from fentanyl overdoses. We're going to come back to that. But tell me about Emily's Hope first, and then we'll talk about the issue and the challenges and what your charity is trying to achieve.
Of course, of course. So it comes from a very personal and devastating tragedy. I lost my 21-year-old daughter, Emily, to fentanyl poisoning on May 16th of 2018. So the anniversary of her death, 8 years since her death, is quickly approaching. Now, she didn't know that there was fentanyl in the drug that she used, but we knew that she had a problem. We knew things weren't right. She had started with marijuana and Xanax as a teenager, and I had gone through a lot with my daughter trying to stop her from using substances. We now know about the devastating effects of marijuana on the adolescent brain. And we just didn't, we weren't able to really stop her from using some of these substances. And we didn't know how far it had progressed, her use, her drug use. And so we were planning an intervention, and we were 3 days away from holding that intervention when she died. And of course, I mean, it was the worst day of my life. And it was really, really difficult. I was working in broadcasting at the time, and I couldn't go to work. I took about 3 months off, and when I finally did go back to work, that's when I really the wheels had started turning for me, starting this charity. And we just started with wanting to raise money to help people to get into treatment, and we've expanded so much. And now our naloxone, our Narcan boxes, I think that's the effort we're going to talk about today
Mm-hmm.
to save lives, has expanded to 3 states and growing. But really everything I do in my daughter's name. And just I don't want any other family to ever go through this kind of devastating loss. And it's so unnecessary. She didn't know, like I said, there was fentanyl in the drug that she used, and she didn't have to die. We had a kid with a problem on our hands, and many, many families do. But we should have been able to get her help. And my main goal in these years that have followed is to stop these unnecessary deaths, to save lives, and to get people the help that they need.
Well, Angela, our program is, leading in challenging times, and obviously going through the death of a child
Yeah.
is probably the most challenging time that anybody can ever have. And when you do that and you talk about that story, my heart goes out to you and other parents that have lost kids and saying, "Hey, how do we make a difference going forward?" If you can prevent one person from going through
Right.
what you did, it's worth what you're doing. And so when you talk about that in a broad sense, you talk about getting started with some sort of substance abuse. What what does what does your program deal with? How do you get early on to stop this before it gets farther?
Well, there are so many things. There are three legs to this stool, I always say. There's the law enforcement side, which we hear a lot about, trying to keep fentanyl and other powerful opioid analogs, such as nitazines, out of this country. There's the treatment and recovery side for people who are suffering from substance use disorder. And of course, there is prevention. And one of the things I did early on was gather a panel of experts and develop a substance use prevention curriculum. So, our Emily's Hope substance use prevention curriculum is now in 6 states. It's actually being adopted by a couple of states as a statewide program for schools. We're K through 12. We start in kindergarten. And we're also in one foreign country, Uganda. We have a teacher in Uganda teaching it to students there. But we start with like who's a trusted adult, how kids deal with their big emotions, what are healthy habits. And we work our way up in third grade. We're talking about what substances do to the brain and the body. It's usually taught by a school counselor. I am so passionate about prevention because we know for every dollar spent on prevention, you save somewhere between 25 and $75 on the back end, right? Treatment is expensive. Relapse can be deadly. So I'm really passionate about prevention, but I also want to keep people alive, which is where our naloxone effort comes from. But we want to do it all, right? We need to do it all, but prevention is key.
You ever feel it's overwhelming? When I saw the number of 1,500 Kansans have lost their lives to fentanyl overdoses, that's a surprise. I don't know anyone that has lost their life to that. And maybe you'd never really know who those people are, but all of a sudden they're gone.
You know,
Um,
you're lucky that you don't know anybody because I have felt for quite some time that we're at a tipping point, that everyone I talk to almost knows somebody or has been impacted by this overdose and fentanyl poisoning crisis. So the numbers nationwide are going down of deaths, still way unacceptable, 72,000 deaths a year from overdose and fentanyl poisoning. But while the numbers are going down, in some areas they've actually increased. So there's a lot of, and the drugs are getting more powerful. We just had a warning from the DEA this week about new drugs that are even more powerful that naloxone doesn't necessarily work on being found in illicit drugs. So we have to teach, as I was saying earlier, kids at a young age just to never put any of these things in their bodies, to never take anything from anybody. And we live in such a, a society where kids are so comfortable with pills, right? And that's why we've seen a lot of teenagers over the last decade take a pill that they got off Snapchat thinking it was a real prescription medication, but it actually contained fentanyl and they died. So they weren't necessarily suffering from substance use disorder or addiction. They were just experimenting. But unfortunately, that's been one of the biggest problems that we've had also in this country.
Now, you have a podcast that deals with this and you talk about this. What do you talk about on your podcast? Do you do
Yeah,
interviews
well,
with other parents or do you just cover the whole gamut of substance abuse?
all of it. We talk about all of it, right? So I've talked to lots of other parents. I've talked to experts. I have an interview coming up with the nation's drug czar coming up later this month. So a really wide range. In the process of all of this, I became a certified grief educator. I lead support groups and things like that. But the podcast really lets people know that they are not alone. And it doesn't have to be a death from drugs or overdose. It can be. We cover that quite extensively, but we also talk to grief experts. I've had some incredible people on who have overcome really big challenges in their lives, and I think there's inspiration in that.
Let's talk about naloxone. I believe I'm saying that right. Do you have a kit that you send out? How does that process work? Because I think part of your charity is to raise money to be able to send those gifts out, or gifts, they're not gifts, those packages out to families who may need them. Tell me about that.
Right. Right. So right away, we knew there was an issue when we first formed the charity with people getting this life-saving drug, naloxone. Now, over a course of time, naloxone, also known by the name brand, people might be more familiar with Narcan. Naloxone is just the generic term for this life-saving medication. It's a nasal spray. All you have to do is if someone, I'm going to explain how it works first, and then I'll talk a little more about the process. But if you find someone is passed out. Maybe they have shallow breath, pinpointed pupils, they're struggling. You can administer one dose of this nasal spray in one nostril, call 911. That's a really important step because it can wear off if someone is overdosing. So you want to get emergency crews there as soon as possible. And then after you call 911, you administer the second dose of naloxone in the other nostril. It's just a quick nasal spray. There's just one dose per nasal spray, and there are two doses in every kit. And you do that, you wait for help to come, and hopefully the person will be revived. If they need continuous doses of naloxone, if you have more, continue to provide it. The problem is there's so much stigma around substance use and substance use disorder. People used to have to go to the pharmacy and ask for one of these or pay $50 for one if they couldn't find a free kit. And we knew we had to overcome that barrier in order to bring those numbers down. You mentioned that 1,500 Kansans have died from overdose. And it's when in overdoses, in 40% of the time, there's a bystander. So people don't need to die if they have access to this life-saving drug. Now, it doesn't work if it's not an opioid. However, if you see someone passed out, we just want everyone to carry it. We want it to become as common as a fire extinguisher because if you give it to somebody who doesn't need it, it can't hurt them. It doesn't hurt children if they should get into it per se. So we knew we had to come up with a way to get it to everybody in the easiest way possible. So we came up with the anonymous naloxone distribution program, where we have distribution boxes. They are old recycled newspaper boxes that have been repurposed. We stock them, or our partners stock them with naloxone. In Kansas, the Attorney General's office has targeted universities, which is so important. That population, young people, are at great risk. Fentanyl is still the number one killer of people ages 18 to 45. So while some of the ages have been even skewing older in the last couple of years, we know that we have to reach this young population. And so we just want it to be really easy for people to take, to get, and to have on hand. And there is an expiration date on these naloxone kits. So we want people to be mindful of that. We'll be putting out some public service announcements down the road to have people check their expiration dates and go get a new refill for their naloxone. Lasts usually a couple years, but just to have it out there, to have it be common, to get away with, to get rid of the stigma, and it is saving lives. We hear a lot of anecdotal stories in some of the places where we've had it for a while now, and we know that it has saved lives.
Well, you tell a great story, but you still have to get these kits out to people. I know Fort Hays State University, I believe, is one of the public institutions that you're working with, but there's others across the state and other places. If somebody wants to go find one of these and get that, but who does that? It may not be the person that's on the substance abuse side of things. It may be a
Right,
parent, it may be a friend.
right.
How do you make that connection?
Well, so the thing about this is when we first started this effort, we got some pushback of people who thought there was going to be a rush of drug users on these naloxone boxes. But in every case we have found, and that's fine if someone who is using, we want them to have naloxone, people using substances until they can get the help they need, right? But
Hmm.
what we found is it is mostly friends, family members, somebody who's worried about somebody. And now many times it's just concerned citizens. But I do want people to keep in mind that more than 90% of overdoses happen in a residence. So really, we want it to be in every home. And so getting the word out, talking on programs like these, thank you very much for having me, getting the word out. We've got, if you go to our website, emily'shope.charity, up at the very top, there's a banner, find naloxone. We've got a map of where they are, the list, a map. You can find it, the one closest to you. We encourage everyone to carry it.
And so this is not something that it's hard to get. You just need to know where to go to get it, and you
Yes.
can pick it up, no prescription, no special needs. You don't have to, you can put a mask on so nobody knows who you are and you can go in and pick them up, right?
Whatever it takes, whatever it takes. And there are 41 boxes across Kansas now. So there should be plenty of places people can go to find this. And we'll continue to get the word out along with our partnership with the Attorney General's office.
All right, I'm going to take a break and come back and talk a little bit about where this is going long term because you have a great story. And when you talk about your daughter and what happens there, it's a great story that kind of motivates certainly parents, but what you're doing to motivate others. And then we'll re-talk about where to go to get the information and be able to pick up the naloxone and get it to where it needs to be. We'll be back with more after this on Forward Ever.
Since 1776, the United States of America continues to stand tall. It's been tested before, many times. Through grit and the ability to move forward, we create better tomorrows. We help our clients live their best lives to and through retirement. We make it easier. Thank you, Kansas. Worth Wealth Management, enhancing lives and strengthening families.
Welcome back to Forward Ever, leading in challenging times. Our guest today is Angela Kennecke, who is a part of and the founder of Emily's Hope. Emily's Hope is a wonderful charity that's set up to really help people understand substance abuse, where it goes, but has a solution for those that are around or have family members or friends that are suffering from that. Because as we talked earlier with Angela, people are dying of fentanyl overdoses, and many of them don't even know fentanyl is in the medicine they're taking, especially younger people. So, Angela, I mean, your story is one that if you're a parent or if you're a friend or if you have somebody, a brother, sister, etc., that's struggling from this, what are the signs that they should look for? Because sometimes it's hidden and you don't see that until it's too late. And you know, at that point, you can't go down and find one of the naloxone kits and bring it back. I mean, you need it on hand first. So, what should you look
Right.
for as a parent, friend, family member?
Right. So it is a very difficult disease. That's the one point I want to make it that is that substance use disorder is a disease of the brain. However, in our society, we tend to treat diseases of the mind different than diseases of the body, right? But substance use disorder is a disease of both. So it affects the brain and it affects the entire body. People become physically dependent. Nobody thinks they're going to, right? When people take a substance the first or second time, nobody thinks they're going to. But there are a lot of factors that make people susceptible to substance use disorder. One of them, of course, is genetics. If you have it in your family, you're much more likely to suffer from it. Another is the environment that you're in. If you have access to drugs and you can get them easily, and we know in this country they're readily available, that is another risk. And then the third would be age of first use. There are also personality traits. If somebody's a risk taker, that sets them up. My daughter was a risk taker. She was a gymnast on the balance beam. What more, that was a really big deal. She started using at a young age, and so the younger the age for first use age, the age of first use, the greater the risk of becoming addicted to a substance. And so whether that be alcohol or marijuana or pills or other drugs, we really want to protect our kids from using. If I could stop everyone from using until the age of 25, that's probably not realistic since the law says that you can use at age 21. But if I could, I would ask everyone to abstain until at least they're 25. But in terms of risk, when you're looking at a loved one and you're thinking maybe there's a problem, I think if you think there's a problem, you're probably right. Changes in behavior for young people, changes in grades, changes in friends. I mean, we saw a lot of those things with my daughter. Um, you can see a change in physical appearance, everything that will indicate that they're using, and trust your instincts. And I always say it's the only disease that involves denial. Although sometimes when people are suffering from diabetes, let's say, they want to deny that they're having a problem and just go out and eat sugar. That's sort of typical of human nature, right? But people do deny they have a problem and they want to protect their use. And it's so hard for people who don't suffer from substance use disorder to understand this because we don't understand, like, why do you lie about it? Why are you hiding it and covering it up? But the drug becomes the whether that be alcohol or drugs, it becomes the most important thing to that person over everything else. It's like a trick that the brain, the high levels of dopamine that enter the brain, and it's just so hard to overcome. And people really can't do it alone. They need help. They need professional help. And it can be a variety of things that can work for people to get into recovery, but medically assisted treatment or medications for opioid use disorder are just a proven gold star to help keep people alive, help people get into recovery. So please, if you have any questions at all, we have a plethora of resources on our website. I write a blog. We do daily headlines, and I'm a journalist, so I had to start following everything to do with this subject and writing stories and putting it on our website. Just a lot of good information for people, including our podcast if you need to learn more.
Well, Emily's Hope.charity is where you go for the website. And it's a scary time to be a parent. All the social media that's out there, all of that, it's a scary time. And do you do some coaching for parents as well? Are there tools you have on Emily's Hope.charity that help parents?
Yes, we do. So we actually have a youth prevention coalition and newsletters that go out to parents. And so if you're interested in signing up for that, we have a lot of information for parents out there and also for families who've lost someone. We have a website I wanted to mention to you. It's called More Than Just a Number, morethanjustanumber.org, where if you have lost someone, if you're one of those families struggling, you can submit their story and their photo. We want people to know that we've lost so many incredible people in this epidemic and so many young people. And I always talk about the lost potential to the world, the lost books that could have been written. My daughter was an artist, the lost art that could have been created, or businesses that could have been started, music that could have been composed. And we will never know because of this horrible epidemic. And I'm glad to see nationwide numbers are going down, but we're not done yet. I always say I'm trying to end something. I'm not trying to start something. I'm trying to work my way out of a job, and I'll be happy when that number is at zero.
Well, you keep up the good work, Angela. I'm just amazed at the numbers, but I'm more amazed at your effort of telling Emily's story, because it's a in your world. I'm sure it was a very difficult time, but thank you for stepping forward and saying, "Hey, we want to help others do the same thing." I really appreciate you being on our program today.
Oh, thank you so much, and you're welcome.
Make sure you check out emily'shope.charity. We'll have some things listed on the video side of our webcast and also on our link when we post it on Hayes Post. But thank you for listening to our program today. When we talk about forward ever leading in challenging times, this is one of those challenging times you can have as a parent, as a friend, as a brother and a sister, and you can make a difference. Check it out, emily'shope.charity. Thanks for listening to Forward Ever Leading in Challenging Times. Is brought to you by Worth Wealth Management, where you can live with confidence. I'm Gary Shorman.
Thanks for joining us for Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times, presented by Worth Wealth Management. Join us right here next week for another episode with host Gary Shorman. Until then, remember to move forward ever, backward never.